Hello crafty friends! Today's video shares how to create quick and easy backgrounds using an acrylic block. This technique has been around for a long time, but I'm going to share a few new spins on it and kick it up a notch. Let's start with the background on this SLIMLINE card. For this background, I needed a long and skinny acrylic block. I didn't have any that were quite long enough for a SLIMLINE panel, but I did find this one by Holtz. One side is etched with grid lines. I'm using the other side, which is smooth. I pulled several colors of blue and purple distress ink to create this ocean background. You can use any ink you would like as long as it reacts with water. I applied stripes of color to the block. I used tumbled glass, peacock feathers, mermaid lagoon, faded jeans, dusty concord, and chipped sapphire. I made sure to overlap the colors as I was applying to get a smooth transition between each color. I spritzed it with water generously, flipped it over, and placed it on top of a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock. I think the key to this technique is to put something heavy on top while it dries. If you pull the block off right away, the color saturation isn't as intense. Like I mentioned, my block wasn't quite long enough, so I will add more color to the bottom in a bit. While that is drying, let's work on the next background. This time, I'm using a much smaller acrylic block. Instead of Bristol paper, I'm using the smooth side of a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock. Since the block is so small, I could get two backgrounds on each piece. This time, I'm using mini distress ink cubes instead of the full ink pads. I applied festive berries, mustard seed, and mermaid lagoon in stripes on the block. I spritzed it with water, flipped it over, and laid it down on the cardstock. Just like the first card, I put something heavy on it while it dries. Let's do one more example. Before I get to inking, I wanted to mention that I like to clean my acrylic blocks before doing this technique. I used alcohol wipes for a quick wipe down. This time I'm using a different shaped acrylic block that has some curved edges. Instead of distress ink, I used distress oxide ink. I applied squeezed lemonade, picked raspberry, and carved pumpkin to the acrylic block, making sure the ink was applied to the edges so it would keep the shape. I spritzed it with water and laid it down on the smooth side of a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock. I put something heavy on it and put it aside to dry. Now let's go back to our first background since it's dry and finish the bottom. Using a different acrylic block, I added tea dye distress ink to the block and spritzed it with water to resemble sand. I laid it along the bottom of the piece to fill in the open space. This time I removed the block before it was completely dry and dried it off camera using a heat gun. I repeated the process, but this time used vintage photo distress ink to add some darker shading along the bottom. Here's a look at the final piece. I just love the faux watercolor look this technique gives. I finished the cards off camera. Here is the card I created with the first background to resemble an ocean. I stamped and Copic colored these adorable images from the new Vitamin C stamp set by Simon Says Stamp and used the coordinating dies to cut them out. I even added an action wobbler to one of the images to make the mermaids look like they are swimming. I finished off the card with a sentiment from the same stamp set. Moving on to the second background with a small rectangle acrylic block, I die cut it using a stitch rectangle die and stamped a sentiment and image from this Aiden's Art stamp set. This stamp set was designed by my son Aiden. I will link to a video in the description below talking more about this special stamp set. I had so much fun with this design that I made a bunch of them off camera. These cards are a bit smaller. They are 4-bar sized. I didn't get a chance to finish off the background where we used a curved acrylic block and distress oxide ink, but I wanted to give you a closer look at it after it dried. I really like how it turned out and I can't wait to finish it off with a sentiment and a cute little critter. I also wanted to mention that if you get any ink in the areas you don't want, one of these sand erasers will get rid of it easily. Once I finish this card, I will share it over on my Instagram. I'll link to my Instagram page below in the description along with the supplies used on today's cards. I hope you will give this technique a try. I plan on going through all my acrylic blocks to create some more backgrounds. I'm definitely going to use that small circle one and do this technique several times to fill a background. Before I go, here are some video notes. Try using an acrylic block to create quick and easy backgrounds. Try different shaped ones for unique looks. Remember to add something heavy on top while it dries to keep the color vibrant and get the ink to blend. Try mixing up the size of your cards. Today's video shared examples of a slimline panel, a 4-bar size panel, and a regular A2 size panel. Don't have an acrylic block? No worries. You can use a piece of acetate or recycled packaging for a similar look. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here, and I will be back soon with another video. Have a great day and happy crafting.